sweet old lady. I'll say sweet because I think she had sweet intentions, but she came up to us like, how long have you guys been in America? And then she was like, welcome to our country. Welcome to our city. Welcome, beautiful people, to the Lost and Local podcast. We're Adam
and Hannah,
two Korean citizens who grew up abroad and are now figuring out life in Korea.
Join us as we share stories and our honest perspective on what it means to be lost and local.
So before we go deep into our topic today, Hannah, do you have an icebreaker for us?
I do.
Okay.
So May is called 가정의 달 in Korea. It's like a month full of family holidays. So I thought we could talk a little bit about what we do for Parents' Day, which is May 8th, and kind of share how that's a little different from how Mother's Day or Father's Day is celebrated in the US.
Okay, cool.
So what do you do? How do you celebrate?
Okay, for us, my wife and I, we never really celebrated Parents' Day until we moved to Korea 7 years ago or 6.5 years ago. And I didn't know that they just combine both the mother and the father together.
Yeah.
So my wife and I, we both didn't really grow up with fathers, but my grandparents, which is my wife's maternal side of the parents, they were at that time, both of them were still alive and doing well. So we started the tradition of we would buy flowers and then we would head over and we would get chocolates too. So we'd buy chocolates and flowers. And we would head over to the grandparents. We actually go once a week. So already.
Yeah.
But it made it special because we brought chocolate and flowers to them.
Nice.
And then, of course, we gave flowers to my mother-in-law, too. But, yeah.
Do you know what flowers?
No, I don't. Pretty flowers, I guess. Colorful.
That's so funny. I think traditionally you're supposed to give them carnations, which are like red flowers.
We'll put carnations on the video here, but I don't even really, I couldn't tell you what a carnation looks like.
Yeah.
Actually, I know what roses look like.
Thank you, Hyojin, for doing all the hard work. But I'm sure they still loved it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Wow.
Well, how about you? What'd you do, Hannah?
So, it was a little harder for me because I've lived apart from my parents since I was 14. So we haven't really been close, like in proximity. And then some years they wanted me to celebrate the American style days. And then other times they'd be like, oh, you should be celebrating the Korean time. So it was very confusing for me, but I tended to just do it on May 8th because it's easy to remember, like instead of the third Sunday or something, right? That's how Mother's Day works in America.
I actually don't even know. Is there like
Mother's Day?
That's weird. I don't know. It's not the same, I guess. Or is it like always like the second month? Or is Mother's Day on a Sunday? I don't even know. Is it always like considered the second Sunday of each May or something?
I don't know. Okay, we gotta do a fact check. Just shows how we're not very plugged in. But anyway, so I was just like, I don't want to celebrate Mother's Day and Father's Day. I'm just gonna celebrate one day for my parents, and I would usually like write them a nice long letter on like Kakao or like email, and like my mom would then later on would be kind of like, it should be longer this year than last year. She would kind of, just like give me a little nudge.
That's really sweet that you write something.
I guess so.
Do you do your like, I know the other day you were telling us about how you like to buy the stuff from the artsy places. Do you usually write it on that? But you said sometimes you did Kakao.
I would just do Kakao, not like a physical letter.
Okay.
Just because sending things to China was never consistent. Like you would never know if it arrives on time. So I would just send them like letters. And now that I'm in person, I feel like I have to make up for those like 15 years.
Like do something special.
And do something nice this year. So I'm thinking.
Okay. Yeah, it was something that I noticed because I really didn't know what Parents' Day was because in the States you celebrate Father's Day and Mother's Day separately.
Yeah.
But I think it's kind of nice because in America it can get really awkward for broken families, kids who don't have Father's Day, and then you're like, hey, for the half of the kids, let's celebrate your father, while the other half really feel the lack of presence. So Parents' Day is a much safer way to celebrate.
Yeah.
I like that about Korea. I like that. Yeah, very nice. Cool. All right. Well, we're going to get a little bit deep today about the topic of racism and microaggression. I think that this is important for, especially for third culture and it doesn't even matter even if you're Korean in third culture, if you're just third culture from whatever ethnicity you are, I think this will resonate with a lot of you, because I think it's important to share our stories so that people can understand how we overcame it. And maybe they can find some comfort with that.
I wish I had overcome it. I'm still, I still respond with anger, but I think it is very helpful to kind of share. Like, these are real experiences. If you're experiencing this, you're not alone, or you're justified in like protecting yourself from these kinds of comments or these kinds of situations. That's how I'm approaching it.
And I feel like racism was always it always existed in Western culture, like for both of us growing up in the States, at least you until you moved to China. But I feel like because of social media and because of some of the things that happened in 2020 with George Floyd and all those things, it just really percolated and just everyone started becoming more uber aware of racism and microaggressions.
Yeah.
So I feel like it really came to the forefront. And as much as it was disparaging to hear about all the crazy things about racism, I think it was also really important for us to become more aware of it.
Yeah.
So, what's like a good definition of microaggression, Hannah?
The way I see it is sort of it's a more hidden version of racism. So no one's going to overtly say you can't sit here or you like don't belong here. But there are these like subtle comments that continuously remind me that I don't belong. And it's like not my space to feel welcomed or comfortable, and that the responsibility is on me to educate someone else when they are actually the ones being very rude to me. So that's how I define microaggressions.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. I don't think I was unable to really put to words that, but when I think about it, that definitely has probably happened to me. I just wasn't aware of like the definition of it.
Yeah. What about you? What does racism mean to you?
Yeah, I think racism comes in a couple different forms. One, just like individual racism towards the color of your skin, or towards something that is just personally towards you. And then there's that word we call systemic racism, where policies and practices and structures in society have all it's how a particular group is disadvantaged because of it. So I think we have those two different type of racisms, but I think it definitely, unfortunately, still exists in probably all societies.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that definition. And I think that's just the reality of societies, right? People always want power and they find a reason to assert power, and it falls onto these arbitrary traits like race. Yeah. So I guess we should dive in to our experience.
Yeah.
But
let's do it.
when we were planning this, Adam wanted to really like emphasize that we're not trying to bash a certain country or just purely criticize just for the sake of criticizing, but just kind of share how it's impacted us as people and how it's shaped our relationships, our view, our like decisions to eventually settle down in Korea. And it's just kind of all tied in to our experience. And that's why we wanted to talk about it.
Yeah, that's worded well. I concur.
Okay, first question. What was your first experience or a vivid memory of racism?
Growing up in a small farming town of one high school in southern Indiana, that was tough.
Yeah.
It was not easy. So immediately I got all the regular words and people making fun of me. I would get in fights growing up, and that's why I learned how to wrestle. That's why I started working out, because I needed to learn how to defend myself. I remember just literally going to blows in like first grade with someone. And then,
gosh.
so I got in a few fights because of it. And then,
So first graders knew these derogatory terms.
oh yeah, like ching chong chang. And they would like,
Oh my
of course do this like that. And
Yeah.
yeah, I got named everything under the sun. But I think most of us, especially if you live outside of a larger metropolitan diverse culture, you're just gonna get that.
I see.
And unlike Yeun that talked about our first guest, where she just kind of like brushed it aside or wasn't aware of it, it definitely, when you're in a society where you're the only really person there. Of course, I did have a Korean adopted sister that I really didn't mention in the previous podcast, but that's a whole different story. I won't go into that. One of the most vivid memories that I had of racism, this occurred in South Carolina. My family went to visit a place called Myrtle Beach. I don't know if you probably have never heard of it.
I've heard of it.
Oh, okay.
Never
It's like
been,
a very like touristy spot. And it was popular. Maybe it's still popular now, but it was popular back in the day. And my family would make annual trips with the whole maternal side of the family. So my mom's parents, and then her brothers and sisters, and then all the cousins, they would all go to South Carolina. So South Carolina was, a southern state. So we went there, and my adopted father at the time, he was still in the household. So this was probably because my parents divorced. I can't even remember when, third or fourth grade. I can't actually remember.
Pretty early.
But I was young enough to where he was still part of the family. So he liked to go golfing. So for whatever reason, he took me to go golfing, but I wasn't going to golf to technically go golfing with him, but I was just going with him because it was just something that he probably got pressure to take his son with him. So I went to the golf course with him, and he wasn't like the golfer that walked. He always rented a cart. So we get there, he goes up to the counter, and the person said, "Who is he?" And then my adopted father said, "Oh, this is my son." He's like, "Well, he's not going to be able to, he's not allowed to.
No.
He's not allowed to sit on the cart." Now, I'd been on golf courses before with golf carts. So it wasn't like, oh, this is a policy. So even at that age, I knew like something is not right.
Yeah.
So in my mind, I thought, well, probably we're going to not golf at this place.
Oh no.
But my dad made me walk behind the cart the whole time that he golfed.
So he didn't take your side.
No. And I still remember like realizing that, wow, it was like a double whammy.
Yeah.
Number one, like deep systemic racism. And then my adopted father just like, okay, well, I want to golf at this course.
Yeah.
He could have taken me back, but he just like, okay, just go ahead and walk. He didn't defend me or anything like that.
Oh.
And then one other circumstance that really stuck out is we made a summer trip. And I don't know if this was after the South Carolina thing or if this was before, but we made a trip to Gatlinburg, Tennessee, another southern state.
Yeah.
Gatlinburg is a kind of a famous like area where people will go vacation if they're on the East Coast. So my family pulled up to a hotel called the American. I was like, what? So my mom was like, oh, come into the lobby with us. And I saw the hotel said American. And I'm like, I'm going to just stay here. Because I thought if I walked into the hotel like they did at the golf course, they're not going to let me stay at the hotel.
Yeah.
Then we were at some shop and I bought sunglasses to hide my Asian eyes. I would wear a hat and because I wanted to make sure that we wouldn't get kicked out of the hotel, or I wouldn't get kicked out of the hotel. So I was definitely aware of, unfortunately, how society treats someone of color.
After a while, did your mom start realizing these things and doing things to protect you, or?
She never knew about the golf thing. Oh. And she actually never heard about this story.
I see.
About the Gatlinburg thing. I never mentioned it. But I mean, of course, I think she was quite aware. When I was younger, I would get picked on at the local park, which was only like 2 blocks away from my house. And I'd come home crying. And she had, I don't know where she found this. It was called Chinese Eyes. It was literally a book called Chinese Eyes.
Oh my gosh.
But the book was addressing racism. So it was like, oh, you know, if you're Asian, you're going to get made fun of having Chinese eyes. But I don't know what the premise of the book was, but it was supposed to bring me comfort. And
but it clearly didn't.
Well, I mean, I don't remember the premise of it, but I just remember like, okay, she's aware of it, but she'll never be able to understand it. Like none of my family will understand what racism feels like, even though they, you know, have a member of their family that's going through it.
Yeah.
And it was definitely difficult. But those are just a couple of stories that stick out to me. How about you, Hannah?
Oh, I don't know. I just want to say I'm really sorry those things happened to you, and like it was very overt for you.
Oh yeah,
in the South.
There are plenty of other examples. This is just 2 that really stick out.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know if it's like that anymore, but when I was living in the States, I made it a point to never travel more south than like Virginia because I was scared of those kinds of things. And as a woman who looks pretty young, I was always like, I feel like someone might take advantage of me or say something that like ruins the whole trip. So it's my own prejudice, but I was like, DC is the lowest I'll go. Oh, wow. And I don't want to go anywhere else. Well, the exception of Florida, because I feel like Florida is its own little situation because there's a huge like Cuban population, and like Disney World is very much a tourist location. So you're not really dealing with people who are like
deep South.
Yeah.
Culture.
But But anyway, for me, my experience wasn't that overt. It was growing up. It was people who didn't really know me. So people who, I guess for you too, but like in my class, people were very respectful. My teacher, whenever my like parents came to school for, you know, like parent teacher conferences or things like that, they wouldn't try to talk to me. They would try to talk to my parents, and then I would just like translate on the side. But they were treating my parents with respect and like treating them like adults, even though they didn't speak English as fluently.
This is when you were in elementary school?
In elementary school, like first and second grade. So in that way, I never felt like someone was overtly discriminating against me. But when I came back for college, I was constantly facing microaggressions. So like we would go to Target, and what does where I'm from have anything to do with buying items, right? But the person working there would be like, where are you really from? And I'd just be like, I don't want to affirm their prejudice that someone like me is not American. So I would say I'm from Pennsylvania, even though I'm actually from Korea. And so I was constantly just like fighting back. And then when I got my first job at a public school, that was a really uncomfortable situation, but I was also in the position where I really wanted a job. So I was willing to sweep things under the rug, but I had basically gotten the job with the department head, but the principal wanted to like interview me one last time, you know, just to do that. And nothing on my resume indicates that I'm not from the States, because I graduated from a US college. Like everything I have on my resume is in America, but the first thing he asked me is like, where are you from? And because it's like an official interview, I felt like I had to be honest. So I said, oh, like I grew up in all these different countries. And then he was like, oh, your English is so good. And, you know, like doing all that stuff. And I was like really uncomfortable. And I could tell that my department head was also uncomfortable, because this has nothing to do with whether I'm equipped to be a teacher or not, right? But it was all just like, I was just kind of satisfying his own curiosity in my cultural background. And then I was like, oh, well, I'll never see this man again, even though he's the principal. Like in high schools, like principals don't really interact with just average classroom teachers. But the first day of orientation with the whole staff present at the auditorium, he singled me out. And I was not the only person who got hired that year, but he singled me out and he was like, this is Hannah Jang, who grew up in these 3 countries, like welcome her. And I was just like, oh my gosh, like this is the kind of school I'm working at. Like, I can't believe no one's standing up for me. And everyone just applauded. And I was so like angry more than embarrassed, because it's not his story to share with everyone. And also, why is that interesting? Like that, I don't know. Like, I just felt like he was like like I was a zoo animal and he just wanted to show me off.
Yeah. Cause he wanted to show we're diverse.
Ugh, yeah.
And probably wanted to show, see, we're not just all like vanilla. We are a school that appreciates diversity. So in that way, he kind of singled you out. But for a lot of people, from their perspective, they're like wanting to celebrate it because they think, oh, well, that's so great about her. But then for the person, the recipient, that can come across really.
Yeah. And nothing else about the school was diverse. So I think that's even worse, right? When I was clearly the token of that community. And I had to assume that role to get the job. So a lot of like feeling like I was stuck. And then we also did like intros within the staff, because once the school year starts, you barely interact with other departments. It's just so busy and you're like stuck in your department. So we were introducing ourselves and they're like, what are you teaching? And I was like, oh, I'm teaching English. And they'd be like, oh, ESL, like English as a second language. And so there was this second layer of like, people like you don't teach English language arts or like gen ed. You teach special ed. And I would always have to be like, no, I teach like 9th grade English, gen ed. And they'd be like, oh, that's great for you. And they wouldn't apologize, even though it was very clear that they assumed certain things of me.
Because of being a person of color or a different race outside of the majority.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with being an English as a second language teacher. It's just, I'm 100% sure if I was white, they would have not asked that question.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So all of these microaggressions.
Interesting.
Yeah. Oh, wait, I have another one. I'm sorry. I'm I'm not trying to bash the school, but it was very hard for me. So another thing is we had like an English department. Instead of having your own classroom, we would all share classrooms and you would all be in one department. And so I would have a little cubicle. I would eat my lunch there and all of that. And for some reason, they kept wanting to know what I brought for lunch. And that was so uncomfortable.
Were they just assuming that you were bringing kimchi and like,
I guess so.
Like
I don't know.
kimbap or something, some like traditional Korean dish that's exotic, that's
Maybe.
not like a bologna sandwich or a peanut butter and jelly
or
sandwich.
like yogurt. I don't know. And at first I was trying to give them a benefit of a doubt and be like, oh, maybe that's their way of small talk and like wanting to get to know me. But then I noticed they wouldn't ask anyone else what they're bringing for lunch. They would only ask me what I'm bringing for lunch. And
just assuming that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So then I was like, oh yeah, you want something exotic? And then I started bringing like oxtail bone soup or like, like I started playing into the role that they wanted for me, because I was like, you're clearly wanting something. Here you go. Yeah.
But didn't you eventually transfer out of that school?
Oh yeah.
And you went to a more diverse school,
yes.
right?
Yeah.
Was that part of the reason why some of the microaggression that you received?
Actually, no. I moved because of visa reasons.
Oh.
Yeah. They weren't able to sponsor my visa, so I went to grad school.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, so they initially said they were going to sponsor you, and then they pulled that offer back.
Yeah, but I don't think they knew what it entailed.
Mm.
So they're like, sure, we'll do that. And then when it came time to actually start filing things, and you can file on your own, but it's recommended that you have a lawyer. Then the school was like, oh, this is pretty serious and it's pretty involved. Oh. Actually, we don't think we can do this for you. So
that's horrible.
I mean, but that's the reality of being an immigrant.
Wow. Okay. I mean, just hearing just your story and then Yeon's story about them not giving her and granting her permanent residency. It's surprising because that's like a world that I'm not, even me, because I was naturalized as a citizen when I was a young child. I never really got to experience what it's like to be an immigrant. My wife did experience that, and so I started learning like what it from a personal point of view. But it wasn't something that I was that aware of for a lot of people who are immigrants into America, how arduous that process can be. And
I just wanted to add one more thing about that, because I wish I had said this. There's this myth that people are undocumented in America because they didn't get in line and they didn't do it the correct way. But that's a myth. There is no correct way, because I did the correct way and I still didn't get anything right. And so for people to be like, oh, why don't they just do it the right way? Like, there is no path that way, realistically. Like, you could get the best degrees, and if you're not lucky, or if you don't meet someone who wants to sponsor you and actually like believes that you have something to contribute to the country, they're just going to pull out and nobody can say anything about it, because they're like, oh, we're going to give these jobs to Americans. So it just wanted to put that on camera for the record.
I think that's something that's important for people to know, because I feel like for a lot of people who are like incumbents to America and who have always had that, I guess they would call privilege, they just disdainfully look at the immigration process and like get in line like we all did. But back in the day,
there was no line.
The immigration process for even my adopted family who are German American, it was like not even close to the same process. So,
well, I guess for them, making it to the States alive was the main thing.
True.
But you didn't have to like prove anything to get land or to, stay there.
Yeah.
So,
as long as you were of a certain color of skin.
Yep.
Yeah, that's interesting. I guess we could segue into when these incidents have transpired. Like, what's your usual response?
So as you all know, I'm a rebel.
A little edgy.
So I like to push back, and I don't want to confirm their like microaggressions or assumptions. So if my Uber driver is like, where are you really from? I'm like, Boston. And they're like, no, where are you really from? Boston. Okay. And like to the end, even if it's like a 20-minute drive, I will like stick to that story. I won't give in. Unless they themselves are an immigrant. Like sometimes I would have like a Brazilian Uber driver, and he would first share like how he came to the country, and then he's like, what about you? What's your story? Then I'll share, because I think he's like genuinely interested in wanting to know my story, or like form a connection as one immigrant to another. But if it's not with that kind of intent, I'm just like, I'm shutting this down. That you're assuming that I'm not from this country. I'm shutting this down. So that's how I usually respond. If I'm going to see that person again, I'm actually very upfront. I'm not afraid of confrontation. And so I'll like call them out. Maybe not in front of the entire group. I'll pull them aside and just do like a one-on-one. But I'll say like, hey, this is really inappropriate because XYZ. I don't think you knew, but like, this is why. And moving forward, I would appreciate if you didn't do this. So I'm like that. But if it's like someone's like drunkenly yelling at me on the street, I just ignore and I just like move on.
Wow. Yeah. Okay.
What about you, Adam?
Well, I like that you stand your ground.
Oh, really? Oh, really?
Well, a couple of years ago when my wife and I were visiting the States, I think this was back in 21, 22, we went to the token German restaurant in the town that I grew up in. Oh. I was visiting my mom. So traditionally we always will go to this restaurant. And my wife and I were sitting with my adopted mom, who's German American. She's Caucasian. And then I think my brother was there, and I don't know who else was there, but this sweet old lady, I'll say sweet because I think she had sweet intentions, but she came up to us like, how long have you guys been in America? And then she was like, welcome to our country. Welcome to our city.
Oh, no.
And so, I'm like, oh, thank you so much. And Hyojin, of course, she's very sweet, my wife.
Yeah.
She's like, oh, thank you. And I'm just like, and then she walked away and I'm like, but I didn't like make the woman that obviously was more ignorant than ill intentioned. But I just like, wow, that's funny that this is happening in the 21st century.
Your hometown too.
Yeah. But actually, we went to America most recently, my wife and I, in November. And we happened to be in the state of South Carolina. My wife wanted to go to the Southeast. She wanted to go, she had lived in Atlanta for a while. So she wanted to go back and go to Savannah, Georgia. She wanted to go to like Charleston, South Carolina. If you're on the East Coast, those are like typical vacation spots. When I heard that she wanted to do that, I was like,
oh dear.
I'm like, babe, I really don't want to, but of course, happy wife, happy life. So I'm like, okay,
Indeed.
sure. Now, my worst experience of racism was in South Carolina. And I told my wife, like, babe, and she's like, oh, that stuff doesn't happen anymore. So we literally had a really racist situation happen in South Carolina. We were flying out of Charleston to Dallas, and then Dallas to Korea. So we're in line, queuing in to go onto not the plank, but onto the platform to get into the plane.
Is it called the tarmac?
Not the tarmac, but before you go into the gate down into the thing into the airplane.
Oh, okay.
So we're queued up. Our slots have been called, so we're standing in line, and we're happy. We're talking with each other. My wife and I are talking, and I'm finally, after being in America for a month, I'm excited to start the process of going back to Korea.
Back
so
home,
I'm like really like not boisterous, but just really talking and happy. And we're on we get into the airplane. We're walking to our seat, and there's this person in front of us, which was just a person until he gets into like aisle 28, and he sits to the window seat. And then we have the two seats next to him. Unbeknownst to us, we were going to be sitting next to the person that happened to be in front of us. So we start getting ready to get into our seats, and he turns around and he looks at us like, Cuss is like, oh my, why of all people do you guys have to sit next to me?
Oh my gosh. Oh.
And he said it really loud, and there were all these people around. I'm like, excuse me?
Yeah.
And like the flight attendants were busy helping people, so they didn't hear this like
Outburst.
I'm like, do you have a problem? And he's like, you people, you guys never shut up. And like, he was just like saying all these like weird things. And my wife was supposed to sit in the middle seat, but I'm like, she started sitting like, babe, get out of that middle seat. I'm sitting next to him.
Yeah.
So, after we sat down and the flight started, he didn't say anything anymore on the whole flight. But like when we were landing, I was like, oh, really loudly to my wife, this was great, that we had such a great flight and everything. I just didn't want him to know that
you were uncomfortable.
I didn't want him to feel like, I got the better of them. But I was just like, wow, what's the chances of another racist situation in South Carolina?
You didn't want to ask for new seats?
I wanted to, but the flight attendants never saw the incident, and no one around us stood up for us.
Ugh, yeah.
And these are either people from South Carolina or from Texas. I'm sorry. I don't want to generalize, but That was a reality.
Yeah, that was your experience.
Yeah, no one was standing up for us. And I'm just like, he was so blatantly racist.
Yeah.
And it took every ounce of me not to like physically harm him.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I've got to exercise the fruits of the spirit from the Bible. But I was like, man, like, it's one thing to experience it as an 18-year-old.
Yeah.
It's a whole different story to experience it in my latter years of life. Because I experienced racist things on airplanes. I had this one guy just kept on kicking my seat, and I finally had to ask the flight attendant to give me a different seat. And he was just, I figured it had to do with racism, but it was just ridiculous. But yeah, I just didn't expect it. But at the same time, I was expecting it going to the South.
You're like, you're not surprised.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. My wife was like, oh, that stuff doesn't happen. I'm like, babe, I really don't want to go there. But it, unfortunately, it still happens.
So is she now like, oh, we're never going back?
She has a good heart.
Oh.
She always thinks the best of people. So she kind of lets it like yawn. She just kind of like, oh, you know, just. But for me, I'm very uber aware of racial tensions and racial situations. And I'm just like, ugh, I would rather not put myself in a situation where that could arise. Yeah. Especially when I'm with my loved ones or with my wife. I don't want any like weird situation to transpire where things could get dicey.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Wow. Again, sorry that happened. That's very frustrating. And for no one to stand up, like for that man to have issues, that's on him. But like for no one to call him out on that and be an ally, or like for the stewardesses to not ensure the quality flight that you're paying for, that's like not fair. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's like one of the big things with people who stand up for the disenfranchised. I remember being young, one of my cousins, my first cousins on my adopted side, he was a couple of grades ahead of me. And I remember, of course, I was getting made fun of badly, like normally. And I remember like his response was, oh, don't worry about it. But I'm like, when I was a kid, I'm like, why aren't you standing up for me?
Yeah.
You know, like instead of like, you know, he could have done something about it.
He could have.
But he was just like, oh, don't worry about it. And I'm like, what? Oh, I forgot another racist thing.
Oh no.
I joined Pee-wee T-ball. It's like the sport before baseball.
Ah, okay.
So because you're too small to even hit the ball, if it's being pitched, you have to put the ball on a tee on baseball.
Oh, I've seen this.
And then you have to hit the ball off of that because the kids are too young to even pitch the ball.
Yeah, yeah.
So my mom had me join T-ball. Now the coaches are like high schoolers.
Oh.
Okay. So we're little kids, but you know, the coaches are old to us, right?
Yeah.
So the first game, they never let me play at all. They had me sit in the bullpen.
Oh.
Every kid got to play,
except for
and
you.
they never let me even hit the ball, be part of the team. I remember going home crying. I told my mom, I'm never going to play this sport again. And to this day, I hate baseball.
Oh, no.
Literally hate it.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
It's a beloved sport in Korea, though.
Good old racism, man.
Oh, my gosh.
I'll tell you.
Okay. I guess we're going into the more nuanced experiences. Were there ever situations where you're like second guessing yourself? You're like, oh, is that racism? Is that microaggression? Is it not? And like, how do you deal with these sort of gray areas?
Yeah, I can't think of anything specific, unfortunately, right now. But maybe if you go first, that might trigger something.
Yeah.
Because I never really defined microaggression. It wasn't something that I was aware of. Of course, it happened to me all the time.
Yeah.
But my racism, especially growing up in my time, was a lot more overt and obvious.
Okay.
How about you?
I have a story. And I really, like, please comment below and tell me where you fall on this, if you think it's a microaggression or if you don't think it's a microaggression. But my mom was visiting me one year when I've already been working for a couple of years, so that's like my mid-20s. I'm a grown woman, and I'm taking her around, and we're like just going grocery shopping at a local grocery. And then this older like white grandpa comes up to me, and he's holding this vegetable. It's bok choy. And then he's like, ma'am, how do I cook this? And I was furious because I'm not a worker there. It's very evident that he's talking to me because he assumes I'm Chinese. Koreans don't even eat bok choy. Like, that's not our, like,
It's not like a signature dish that we make in Korean restaurants.
No, it's not. So he's making a lot of assumptions, and he's also, okay, maybe he's not comfortable with technology and he can't Google it on his own, but then why are you buying it? So I was just like fuming, and I was like, sir, I don't know. You should talk to someone who works here. And I like redirected him. And my mom was like, Hannah, you're being so mean. You could have just told him that he can blanch it. And she was like ready to go after him and like tell him how she would do it, even though we don't even eat bok choy like on a regular basis. And so for me, I think my experience, especially my first experience at that job, tainted how I viewed white people. I think, like, not in Boston, but kind of in the suburbs of Boston where it's more homogenous. I think my initial assumption is they don't have good intent and they're ignorant and they're going to ask me to educate them. And so I'm very defensive. But I guess for like someone like my mom who isn't constantly surrounded by microaggressions, she's okay with just like helping him out once or like sharing what she knows and not taking it seriously. But for me, it was like, not again. Like, this is just one other thing I have to think about in addition to the Uber drivers asking me this, in addition to the like restaurant waiters who are like also like asking me certain things. So for me, it's not gray. Everything is like, this is bad. Yeah.
Oh. Actually, I did remember something. You mentioned restaurant. So my wife, my mother-in-law, my brother-in-law, and I went to a nice restaurant, like one of those like the level of like Olive Garden /
Applebee's.
Yeah, but it was nicer than that. It's like a step above. So we get there and we got seated and we waited and we waited. We asked people, is someone going to come? And it was like 40 minutes later, no one came. And I said, we're going.
Yeah.
And then we wrote this like fuming letter to the corporate.
Of course.
Like, it was obvious to us that it was racism.
Yeah.
Even my wife, who's not attentive to these things, she was like, oh my gosh, this is racism.
Oh.
And this has happened in SoCal back in 2009, 10.
SoCal?
Yeah.
That's a surprising location.
Yeah. And we never went back to that restaurant. They gave us like gift cards to go back. And I'm like, nope, we're not going back.
I see.
Yeah. But yeah, I think the microaggression part, if it's not overt, I usually will respond nicer. But it's only because the level of relativity. Because from my point of view, these people, like the woman at the German restaurant, they're just so ignorant and just so not informed that I will jump to the conclusion that they don't have an ill intention unless it's like passive aggressive.
I see.
But yeah, it's definitely not appropriate in the 21st century for that to happen in the States. At least for us, we experienced just living in the States. Other people, for some of you, it was Canada. For some of you, it might be Europe, South Africa.
Yeah.
Who knows? But
yeah,
racism it's something that's not just indigenous to westernized cultures. Of course, it happens, like we mentioned, everywhere.
Yeah.
But we're just sharing our experiences.
Yeah.
Another question on the docket is, did you ever find unexpected allies?
Yeah. Thankfully.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Oh, do
Thankfully. So at my most recent school, so when you become a first year teacher, they pair you up with a more experienced teacher and they like mentor you through the first year to make sure you don't like get overwhelmed or that you quit. Like, they take care of you. And she was a Haitian teacher. And so she grew up in New York and went to like a French bilingual school, I believe. So I think she was also a third culture kid, and she was constantly aware of the fact that like her home culture wasn't always the same as her external culture. And I think she was a huge ally for me for the past 6 years in my time there. And like nothing horrible really happened at my most recent school because it was in the heart of Cambridge. Like we were right next to Harvard, in the heart of Cambridge. We had a lot of racial and cultural and linguistic diversity as well. So in that sense, I didn't feel the same I wasn't the same kind of token I was back at my first school, but I was still a token. I was the only East Asian teacher in the English department. So that still existed. But she was, and I think something about the way that we grew up, even though she was older than me, we shared a lot of commonalities. And like for example, like having teachers who were really strict about handwriting. Like we both grew up like that. Or we had a lot of respect for teachers. And if I had an issue with my teacher, my mom would not take my side. She would take my teacher's side first. And then she'd be like, explain to me, you know? And in that way, I think we were, even despite the age gap, we had a lot of similarities and a lot of like similar perspectives on education and teaching. And like from very serious moments to like, for example, like another person assumed I was an ESL teacher. And I was like, I don't really want to continue working with this person. Is there an alternative person I could correspond with regarding XYZ? She'd be like, yeah, like here's how I would do it. Here's who I would talk to. And she would give me actual practical advice. And then also like during our department meetings, like for icebreakers, we would do Jeopardy. And what's that? Instead of Jeopardy, what do you call that where it's like random Trivia. We would do a lot of trivia things, but I don't think people realize trivia is a very white person thing to do. Like other cultures don't really sit down and do trivia or like go to the bar on Thursday nights and do trivia. So like there'd be all these trivia questions and like the two of us would be like, we don't feel any ice breaking. We feel ice growing. And the two of us, I found a lot of like solace in being in her team or like sitting next to her or like certain like small talk things during like department meetings. We would just be like, we want to keep it professional. We don't know why these people are going into their personal lives. And so having her, it was easier to navigate my department and just like the different cultural things that I experienced. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. What about you?
Well, when I was in the States, one of the things I did banking for 15 years in retail banking. So one of my most recent banks that I worked at, we had a pretty diverse set of employees. We had my manager was Hispanic. The assistant manager was Hmong. Do you know the Hmong culture? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're very displaced within the Chinese culture. And then we had a couple of tellers that were, we had 2 tellers that were Caucasian. So all the people in the higher positions were people of color. Oh. And then, so I don't know what I was doing, but we were talking about some of we were sitting around because our desks are near each other, and someone had experienced a really racist event in Portland, Oregon. They were with their friends, and these people were like saying like Asian slurs at them and stuff. And so we were talking about it. Oh gosh. And of course, like us who are not of the majority were, kind of talking with each other and explaining. And then I don't know what happened. I ended up going up to one of the tellers because we were talking about it. And I'm like, what kind of racist experiences did you have? Because I wanted to include them. I didn't want them to feel like we were just over here. Right. And then one of the tellers is like, I haven't had any.
Because they're white.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, You know, like it made me like, I'm like, oh, that's cute, but at the same time, like, okay. So yeah, but
Wait, so they were your unexpected allies?
no, not them, but
Oh,
just
okay.
like it was nice to work at a bank where there were diversity.
Ah, yeah.
And working at the bank, when I worked in the bank in Southern California, we had a huge diversity. We had a couple Black people, we had some Indian people, Hispanic people, of course, and yeah, it was nice. I enjoyed working in a culture where there was that diversity,
Yeah.
where I didn't get that back when I lived in the Midwest. And yeah, so I guess the allies were just finding comfort in people of color, and some things don't have to be said, but we know we have like that commonality that we don't always have to explain to each other.
Yeah.
We just know like, okay, you've been through the trenches.
Yeah.
You're like one of us.
Yeah. None of us have white allies.
Well, my best man is a Caucasian guy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And I mean, Matt, shout out to Matt. But yeah.
I think I had many coworkers who were not people of color who were really awesome people. Like, I just want to put that out there. It's not like I don't want to be friends with white people, but like, I think there came a point where they were really careful about asking me certain questions because they didn't want to come across as being like racist or ignorant. I guess it's called like political correctness, right? You want it to be PC. So they would like kind of they wouldn't go past a certain line and they'd be like, oh, I'm going to stop here. And I think I did the same thing too in sharing about my life. I was like, if I share this, will they feel like I'm fitting into this Asian stereotype? So I think we were very cautious, and that's why it was very hard for me to see them as like an ally. But they were really nice to me and respectful to me. And I wanted to put that disclaimer.
Yeah. Nice. I think when when the George Floyd thing was happening, I was in Indiana helping my mom during the 5 months that we came back. So I wrote like this Facebook post back in the day about racism, and I talked about the story in South Carolina. And I remember several people were writing me like, they're like, oh, so sorry that this happened, etc. But some of the people that I knew were like, because they were Caucasian, they were like, I need to listen more. And I need to educate myself more on what it means to be a person of color in the States. And a lot of people were those horrible racial situations that were happening, and then like the Asian violence because of the COVID and all that situation, like people were becoming more uber aware of not just being politically correct, but trying to be like, I've been ignorantly just living this like bubble of America is just this great melting pot mentality, and like, you know, oh, we're just all
I'm
kumbaya.
comfortable. Yeah.
And so I appreciated that. I was like, wow, that's cool to see that there are people who are progressing in out of their bubble.
Yeah.
And beginning to see that, okay, you know, what it means to be American, which I don't even like using the word American because I like just say United States instead of American. But like what it means to be American, it isn't just, you know, the first immigrants that came.
Yeah. Wow, that's so powerful that they had that kind of self-awareness to reflect.
It was nice.
Wow.
So I guess that would be a way of people
being allies. Yeah, definitely. That's huge.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to segue now to the local aspect. So Adam, for you, what does racism look like in Korea?
I feel like I'm not really the greatest person to be asked this question because I kind of look at Korea with a very limited amount of experience. But in the short 6.5 years that I've been in Korea, I have seen some things that have happened. An easy example, because these days we have an influx of foreigners. I was here in the majority of COVID where we really became a homogenous country. And then when COVID restrictions lifted and now we're full on right now, Korea is full on with foreigners. You start seeing this happen more. But like, for example, on the subway, if there is a person of color, East Asian descent, Indian, Black, I'll notice that sometimes a person will be sitting there, or they'll sit down at an open space. They'll sit down, and then the person on the left or right of them will literally overtly just get up and make it obvious, like, I don't want to sit next to you. And they're a Korean, of course. And I'm just like, it irks me. It really bothers me. Yeah. And I'm just like, oh, that's not good. That's not a good representation of what we should be as a country, of course, wanting to open up our border and invite people in. Yeah. I think for me, racism in Korea, of course, it exists. And sometimes I'll watch, YouTube will suggest things to me, and I'll see like a video of a person that's not from Korea and say like 5 things I hate about Korea.
Oh, like expats.
Yeah. And then, or teachers that come to teach English, and then they go back to their particular country, and they'll like, and racism will be one of the top things. Yeah. And they'll be like, oh, you know, this is about racism. And the cynical side of me is like, well, at least you're not going to get killed for the color of your skin. I know it's not good. Because, I mean, I don't want to minimize the racism in Korea. Yeah. It exists, but
on the spectrum, it's not.
Yeah. In relativity wise, they're not going to get pushed off a subway. I mean, pushed into a subway in New York because they're Asian. Yeah. And that's just not going to happen in Korea. Yeah. Of course, we have barriers on the subway, so that's already good, but it's just not going to happen. Yeah. Yes, it exists, and it's unfortunate, but that's my experience in Korea. How about you?
Well, I think I'm a little more aware of like how colorism plays in Korea. So colorism is like the paler and whiter you are, the more status you have, and the darker you are, the less status you have. And because I as a kid, I used to ask my parents, like, why is there such a huge stigma against this huge, she's an older celebrity lady, but she's biracial. So her dad was like a veteran, a Black veteran, and then her mom was Korean, and she grew up in Korea, and she became a famous singer, but she does talk about the racism that she experienced. And so I was always like curious, like, why is there such a stigma against her, but not against people who are like biracial, like they have a white parent and a Korean parent, and those kids are like considered really beautiful. And why isn't, because they're all biracial, so why do we have these like weird tiers? And I remember my mom explaining that like back in the old days, like when there were kings and whatever, like Joseon dynasty stuff, people with higher ranked jobs would work indoors, so they would be paler. And then people who had were more lower ranked, like they were servants or they were farmers and they didn't make as much money, they would be in the fields and out in the sun all day. So that's kind of the roots of racism in Korea. Like even within one race, if you're paler, you are assumed to be more like,
lower on the rung of society.
Paler?
Oh, sorry.
Paler, you're a noble.
Yeah. Okay.
You're rich, you're a noble. And then if you're darker or like, darker, then you're not as high. And then when the US kind of interfered with the Korean War and all of that, they brought their own version of racism, right? Like, because obviously African-American soldiers were not treated with the same amount of power or access as like white soldiers. And so from there, like Koreans could see like, oh, this is how, even in America, this is how race works. And that kind of translated into like soldiers who were white, who were probably more affluent because of like the privileges that they had, they would be able to take their wives back. But certain like soldiers who were Black were not able to. So that's also another layer to why there's like all this prejudice against people who are darker skinned. And then in the early 2000s, people who were working in the countryside of Korea, because like Korea is so centralized in Seoul, and if you can't go to Seoul, you don't really have that many. What is it? You don't have access to certain things, and so there would be these really like old men who couldn't find wives because everyone moved to Seoul, so they would start kind of getting mail order brides, or they would find wives in like Southeast Asian countries. And so that's the next layer of stigma. Like if you're darker skinned, one of your parents are probably from a third world country. So we're going to see you in this kind of lens, et cetera, et cetera. So Korea has a huge problem with like colorism, and you'll see like, what do you call those? Like skin clinics too. They're like, oh, here's like a whitening treatment, and they want you to become white, and like paler, you'll have like white skin. And there's nobody calls them out on how problematic that is, but it's just kind of synonymous with beauty, with status and all of that. And like, don't get me wrong, Korea is really trying to change. And so there are a lot of celebrities who are biracial, or even like they're not Korean ethnically, but they have gained Korean citizenship. Like, I don't know if you know Jonathan. He's like a celebrity. Like he does a lot of interviews.
YouTube suggests him on my channel.
Yeah. He migrated here as a kid. I think he was a refugee, but he has now gotten like Korean citizenship, and he's very proudly Korean. There's this model named Han Hyunbin. He's biracial, he's black, or presents more darker skinned, but he was on the face of like all these different brands. And in a way, like Korea's trying to embrace the fact that we're no longer a homogenous, like one race country, but that we're actually more diverse than that. But obviously on the day-to-day in the subway, we don't see that just yet.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes me sad at the same time, because I feel like it's just showing human nature. And I mean, it seems like we're similar to, like, maybe, I don't know if it was the USA influence on Korea, but it seems like we followed their capitalism style.
Yeah.
We're like kind of looking up to the big brother of the States, and that's not always a good thing.
Yeah.
But at least we're holding on to some of our culture. But yeah, I appreciate like you giving us some context of it, because it makes sense. If you were darker Korean even before the Korean War and the Joseon dynasty, obviously if you're darker, you're out in the fields and you're just lower society.
Yeah.
But I feel like for me now, like one of the things in Korea is all about skincare. Like I do put sunblock on because I don't want to get cancer, and I just want to, I don't want to,
for health reasons.
Yeah, I do it for health reasons.
Yeah.
But I I see why like that definitely is still a thing.
Yeah.
The grass is always greener though, because I at least for me growing up in the States, everyone really wanted to be tanned.
I know. I think people in Korea are surprised by that. Because they're all like, if you've seen a Korean woman, they have a parasol, they have like the mask, and they also have like arm guards.
Yeah.
They do not want the sun at all.
Yeah. I actually sometimes will carry an umbrella just to block the sun.
I mean, that's smart.
Yeah.
For your skin.
Yeah.
It ages really quickly, or you can like get skin cancer. But in the States, like people are doing fake spray tans, like they're lying out in the sun without sunblock. Like it's very interesting. You like always want what you can't have.
Yeah. Yeah. The grass is greener.
No.
On to the next question. How do you take care of yourself and not be filled with bitterness, anger, or develop your own prejudices? This is a tough one.
And I guess I have to repent. I don't. I think now that I've left the States, I have much more room to reflect, right, on how I acted and how I navigated the US, life in the US. And I think I was really on the defensive. Like always trying to protect myself, always trying to make sure no one's taking advantage of me or assuming things about me. I would get the last say. And I think I was very like combative. And I think if you're like that, you can't not develop prejudice because you're so focused on protecting yourself that you can't really have the space to be like, oh, maybe they're not coming from that like angle. Or maybe they worded this in a problematic way, but maybe we can still work it out. Like there's no grace, right? There's no room for grace. And I in that way, I do kind of regret not having that space. But I think that's the reality of being a minority in a country like the US. You're not given that space to feel safe. So you're always kind of on the defensive. And how do I take care of myself? I think I really did surround myself with people who were TCKs or people who are minorities. And in that way, I just minimized any microaggressions or racism that I could ever experience because I'm not even with those people. And even like with dating, I would never match with a white man. And maybe it's my own prejudice, but there's always this like nagging sense that, oh, maybe they have yellow fever, or maybe they like have this weird view of like, they're going to exoticize me. And I don't even want to entertain anything like that. So I'm not even going to go on a date.
Even if it's not those reasons that they want to get to know you.
But then you can never know. Right. So it's like, why even give them a chance? I'm just going to protect myself.
Oh, well,
yeah.
I'm just throwing out an example. It could be a person that grew up in the mission field that happens to be Caucasian, but grew up in a different culture and empathizes and understands that culture better.
I've yet to meet one.
Oh.
Yeah.
I can't really speak on that because I don't really know. So, interesting.
Most American MKs that I've met, and I have not met that many, but I've met some, they assimilate back into American culture really easily. So even with them, it's very hard for me to relate.
The family that brought me to Christ, 2 of their kids, one married an Asian woman, and one of the girls married a black man. So it was interesting because she kind of always gravitated towards people of color. She grew up in the mission field. Yeah. So that was interesting.
That is very interesting. On the flip side. Yeah. I've never met someone. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. For myself, I think there is like this Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde situation going on in me. So like there's like the Christian side of me that wants to be empathetic and loving and gracious and forgiving and understanding, and because I grew up in a Caucasian family, so there's a huge part of me that feels very confident with white people. I know how to like talk in their language. Like when I used to go to when I was part of a Korean church, we were the bigger part of the church, and we had a Caucasian church that was part of our church, but they were like but I could get along really well with the older grandmas and grandpas because they were, but so there's like that part of me, but then there's also the side of me that's been very hurt, by all the overt racism and unbeknownst to me, probably microaggressions. And then there's a part of me that's like kind of sad to admit, but when I see a white man married to an Asian woman, for some reason it doesn't rub me well. I don't know why, and I don't think I'm racist, but for some reason, like it's just like it kind of rubs me the wrong way, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm racist. Like, what's wrong with me? Because I know the same thing, like the whole yellow fever thing and everything, and so I think there's a part of me that wrestles with that because I know the right response and I know the correct way to feel. But I think that there's probably some things that I need to reconcile and look past. But I think even before I got part of the Korean culture, I just assumed I was going to marry a white person because that's how I grew up.
Oh,
right? I was only attracted to white women because that's all I knew.
Yeah.
And then it's funny because like now that I'm around Korean women and my wife, I'm like, oh, Koreans are the best looking. I'm like, oh man, I'm like racist. Like I have racist tendencies or something. But yeah, I think as long as we stay humble, I think the reality is it's going to be hard to overcome the prejudices. But the more that the more that you and I have experienced racism, I think that also will help us to be more empathetic.
Oh, I hope so.
Right?
I'll work on it. So far, it's not been my track record, but I'll work on it.
Yeah, I mean, because I feel like a part of me is I don't fit in with American culture, but I don't have any Korean culture unlike you. You have some Korean culture in you because of your parents, and you speak the language and you understand some history. But I'm living in Korea, and I know that there are people that look down on me because I don't speak Korean. I know that there are people that see me as an outsider, but for some reason it doesn't bother me. Like I'm like,
yeah.
Whatever you think is fine with me because I'm going to live in my country regardless of what you think.
Yeah.
You know, I'm just going to embrace who I am. And this is where I was born. This is where I belong.
I guess one thing that is different though, now that I'm in my own country, like my passport country, I'm a citizen, I speak the language, I do find myself being way more friendly to like tourists or like people who aren't from Korea. Like I have way more empathy or like more capacity to support them than I ever did in America. Yeah. So I think if I was at a Korean grocery store here, Korean grocery store. If I was at a grocery store in Korea and an older white gentleman asked me, how do I cook spinach or like bok choy? I think I would answer.
Oh, see, that's great. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because the thing about Korea is because Koreans are so introverted, we're an introverted society. If a Korean is nice to you, we actually get worried because we think that they could be a cult.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like, I want to be really nice to like tourists that come. I'm like, oh, where are you from? And like, I want to do all this stuff. But everyone does the research to find out if a Korean's really nice to you. Be careful because they might try to, you know,
take you to like
take you to
yeah.
And so like I see these people, I'm like, oh, like you should come to our church, you know, like it's an English speaking church, and I want to be really nice to them, like, oh, like what brought you here, like, but then I'm like, oh, I should be careful because they're probably gonna think I'm like
don't be too smooth.
Yeah, I'm a little bit of a cultish. If I'm really super nice, like I try to be this way more we're at church, and I'm realized like out in public,
it might not be taken that way. Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah, I know. Different issues you gotta think about in different scenarios.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that for a lot of us, you know, racism is just something that we'll have to continue to wrestle with.
Yeah.
But I appreciated getting to hear your perspective, your experiences, and I got to share some of mine. And for those of you who have listened to this, there's a good likelihood that if you're third culture, whatever ethnicity you are, you've probably experienced something similar. And yeah, if we would appreciate like any comments down below, any thoughts that would really help. I think all of us to understand and embrace and figure out how to be less negatively affected when racism does come our way. Like fortunately I didn't like punch the guy in the face of the airplane, which I wanted to, like every ounce of me wanted to just like obliterate him. And then I was like, okay, I can't do that. So I'm just gonna let it go and probably try to not go back to South Carolina anytime soon. But yeah, it takes one rotten apple to ruin everything. But outside of that, South Carolina was fine. Anyways. Yeah, well, this was not the easiest topic to digest and talk about, but I think it's one as a third culture we can't avoid.
Yeah.
So at some point we needed to address it. And we'll probably end up having future stories of things that have happened in our life. But for now, these are just both Hannah and I. There's probably a lot more examples of things that we've had to struggle with. It just is we don't want to make this a 3-hour podcast.
Yeah.
But I'm already remembering a lot of things, and I'm not going to mention them here. Like one situation with the police officer was a horrible event.
Oh gosh.
Horrible event in Kansas. I got pulled over. It was just him and me. Anyway, I won't go down that road because that actually gets me kind of upset.
Yeah.
But anyways, yeah, this was fun, even though it wasn't easy. But and I learned some things from you.
Likewise.
So anyway, y'all, thank you so much for checking out the podcast. Of course, we've got all of our podcast platforms as well as the video. This is the best way to really consume our content. But in the meantime, y'all stay safe. God bless. And we'll see you in the next episode. Peace.
Bye.